What if your pet was hiding a secret that could bring down an entire criminal organization? Today, you'll discover the story of a retired police officer and his seemingly ordinary dog, who is actually one of the FBI's most sophisticated weapons. Ever wondered what it's like to learn that someone you completely trust is being controlled by forces you didn't know existed? Subscribe now, hit the notification bell, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? Let's dive into this thriller that will keep you on the edge of your seat. The golden hues of the setting sun painted the Hudson River in amber and crimson as Walter Granger eased his aging frame onto his favorite bench in Riverside Park. At 67, his 6-foot frame still carried the disciplined posture from 30 years on the NYPD force, though arthritis had begun to claim his right knee. The cool October breeze ruffled his salt and pepper hair, now more salt than pepper, as he adjusted his worn leather jacket, the same one he'd worn on countless stakeouts in his final years as detective. "What do you think, Shadow? Beautiful evening, isn't it?" Walter's deep voice, weathered by years of command and 2 packs a day until his retirement, carried a gentle tone reserved only for his companion. Shadow, a magnificent coal-black German shepherd with intelligent amber eyes, sat attentively at Walter's feet. The dog's ears perked up at the sound of his name, his gaze never leaving Walter's face. At 7 years old, Shadow moved with the calculated precision that came from specialized training few civilian dogs ever received. 5 years together, old boy. Who would have thought? Walter reached into his pocket and pulled out a small dog treat. Shadow took it gently, a skill that contrasted with the animal's powerful 85-pound frame and gleaming canines. The park was quieting as families packed up picnic baskets and joggers completed their evening runs. This twilight hour was Walter's favorite, the magical minutes when the city seemed to exhale after a long day, before the night crowd emerged. From his bench near the 79th Street entrance, Walter could see the outline of New Jersey across the river, lights beginning to twinkle as darkness approached. This spot held significance. It was where he'd made his first arrest as a rookie, where he'd proposed to Marie 39 years ago, and where he'd scattered her ashes after cancer took her 3 years prior. She would have loved tonight's sunset, Shadow. The dog rested his head on Walter's knee, as if sensing the melancholy in his master's voice. Walter's phone buzzed, a text from his daughter, Catherine. "Dad, don't forget dinner on Sunday. Emma wants to show Grandpa her science project." A smile crossed his weathered face. His granddaughter's enthusiasm for forensic science amused him. At 12, she already talked about joining the force someday. "We've got dinner on Sunday with the girls," Walter told Shadow, who thumped his tail once in acknowledgement. As darkness settled fully over the park, the lamp posts flickered to life. Walter knew most of the regular evening park patrol officers by name, a courtesy extended to a decorated former detective. "Evening, Mr. Granger," called Officer Ramirez, a young patrolman on his usual route. "Evening, Luis. How's that new baby sleeping?" "Still not through the night, sir," Ramirez laughed, stopping briefly. "You heading home soon?" "Weather report says rain coming." "Just another 15 minutes, Walter replied. "Shadow and I like our routine." As Ramirez continued his patrol, Walter inhaled deeply, savoring the peaceful moment, unaware that this would be the last quiet evening he and Shadow would enjoy for a very long time. Walter was just about to stand when the distant rumble of motorcycle engines broke through the evening quiet. He'd spent enough years on the force to recognize the distinct sound of Harley-Davidsons. Not one, but several. Shadow's ears perked up immediately, his body tensing beside Walter. "Easy, boy," Walter murmured, instinctively placing a steadying hand on Shadow's back. The roar grew louder until 5 motorcycles burst into view, weaving recklessly along the park's paved pathway. Leather-clad riders hooped and laughed, their bikes' headlights cutting harsh white beams through the darkness. A couple walking nearby hurried off the path, the woman clutching her partner's arm. The bikers skidded to a stop about 30 yards from Walter's bench, engines throbbing. They dismounted with casual arrogance, 4 men and 1 woman, all adorned with matching leather vests bearing a red scorpion insignia. Walter recognized the patch, the East Side Scorpions, a local gang that had started as troublemaking street racers but had graduated to drug running in recent years. Public parks closed to vehicles, Walter muttered to himself, years of law enforcement habits dying hard. Shadow remained perfectly still but watchful, his muscles coiled under Walter's palm. The tallest biker, a lean man with a shaved head and full-sleeve tattoos, cracked open a beer and took a long swig before tossing the can into the bushes. Walter winced at the casual disrespect for the park he loved. "Hey, aren't you Granger?" The question came from a stocky, bearded man who stepped forward from the group. Something in his gaze made Walter's neck hair stand on end. It was the calculated look of recognition, not the random eye contact of strangers. "Do I know you?" Walter replied evenly, keeping his hand on Shadow, who had gone preternaturally still. The bearded man grinned, revealing a gold tooth. "Nah, but I know you. Detective Walter Granger, right? The guy who took down the West Side Pipeline back in 18." Walter's mind raced through mental files of arrests and testimonies. The man's face wasn't familiar, but that didn't mean much. Walter had put away hundreds during his career. "You've got me confused with someone else," Walter said, standing slowly, his right hand dropping casually to his side, where he still carried a legal folding knife. "Come on, Shadow. That's a nice dog you got there," said the woman, stepping closer. Her leather jacket was unzipped, revealing tattoos crawling up her neck. "German Shepherd, right? Looks like he could be one of those police dogs." "Just a pet," Walter replied, starting to move away. "Hold up, old man," the bearded biker called, walking toward him with deliberate steps. "I ain't done talking to you yet." Walter turned back, squaring his shoulders, the stance of a man who'd faced down plenty of threats in his day. "My friend here thinks you're the cop who sent his brother upstate for a 12-year stretch," the bearded man said, nodding toward a younger, wiry biker hanging back by the motorcycles. The younger man, barely out of his 20s, fixed Walter with a gaze of pure hatred. "Carlos Reyes. Remember him, officer?" The name clicked immediately. Carlos Reyes, mid-level distributor for a fentanyl operation Walter had helped dismantle just before retirement. The case had been solid, the conviction well-earned. "Like I said, you've got the wrong guy," Walter said firmly, though he knew his lie wasn't convincing anyone. "It's time for me and my dog to head home." "Nobody's going anywhere," the bearded man said, pulling out a switchblade that gleamed in the park's lamplight. "Me and my friends, we believe in family justice." The metallic click of the switchblade echoed in the night air. Walter felt a familiar calm wash over him, the same steady focus that had guided him through countless dangerous situations during his years on the force. His mind quickly assessed his options. No firearm, outnumbered 5-1, and his aging body wasn't going to win any physical confrontations. But he wasn't alone. "That's close enough," Walter said, his voice dropping to the authoritative tone he'd used countless times to control volatile situations. "Put the knife away, and we all go home without trouble." The bearded biker snorted, taking another step forward. "You hearing this, guys? Old man still thinks he's wearing a badge." Shadow had shifted position imperceptibly, moving slightly ahead of Walter, his amber eyes fixed on the approaching threat. Though no command had been given, the German Shepherd's training had kicked in, threat assessment and position optimization. "Last warning," Walter said evenly. "Back off now." "Or what, Grandpa? You gonna call for backup?" The woman laughed, pulling out her phone. "This ought to be good for some views online." The bearded man lunged forward suddenly, knife extended. In that instant, Shadow transformed from attentive companion to tactical weapon. With explosive power, the German Shepherd launched himself forward, a black missile of muscle and precision. A deep, thunderous growl erupted from his chest as he positioned himself between Walter and the attacker. Shadow didn't attack, he didn't need to. His stance was perfect. Head low, teeth bared, ears flat against his skull, every line of his body communicating imminent violence with professional restraint. "Holy shit." The bearded man stumbled backward, nearly dropping his knife. "Call off your fucking dog. He doesn't like weapons pointed at me," Walter replied calmly. "Can't say I blame him." The tallest biker took a step forward, but froze when Shadow's growl deepened, the sound seemingly impossible from an animal his size. "That ain't no pet," the woman said, lowering her phone. "That's a fucking K9. Walter remained silent, watching as the group recalculated their approach. The younger biker, Reyes's brother, started to reach inside his jacket. "I wouldn't," Walter advised quietly. "Shadow's trained to go for anyone drawing a weapon, and he's faster than you think." Goes straight for the brachial artery. Messy way to bleed out in a park. It was a bluff. Shadow was indeed trained, but Walter would never give a kill command. The bluff worked. The young man slowly moved his hand away from his jacket. "You're making a mistake, old man," the bearded leader said, backing away. "You and your mutt can't be on guard forever." "Maybe not," Walter conceded. "But tonight we are. So how about you all take your bikes and find somewhere else to drink your beer?" A tense silence hung in the air. Shadow hadn't moved a muscle, his focus unwavering. In that moment, Walter sensed the shift. The bikers recognized they'd misjudged this confrontation. "Let's go," the bearded man finally said. "This ain't the right time." As the group backed toward their motorcycles, Officer Ramirez appeared around the bend, flashlight in hand. "Everything okay over here, Mr. Granger?" "Just fine, Luis," Walter called back, relief washing through him. These folks were just leaving. The bikers mounted their motorcycles, engines roaring to life. "This isn't over, Granger," the bearded man called over the noise. "Not by a long shot." As they sped away, Walter knelt beside Shadow, whose posture had relaxed only slightly. "Good boy," he whispered, running a hand through the thick fur at Shadow's neck. "Very good boy." Walter knew the threat wasn't empty. In his gut, he felt certain they would be back. Streetlights cast long shadows across Walter's apartment as he peered through the blinds for the third time in an hour. The modest two-bedroom on West 83rd Street had always felt secure enough, but tonight every creak and distant siren set him on edge. Shadow lay by the front door, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert, occasionally lifting his head at sounds from the hallway. "Maybe I'm just being paranoid, boy," Walter said, letting the blinds fall back into place. He checked his phone, 11:42 p.m. The encounter in the park had ended 4 hours ago, but the bearded biker's parting words kept echoing in his mind. Walter moved to his desk and unlocked the bottom drawer, removing a small lockbox. Inside was his personal Glock 19, legally registered and maintained with the same meticulous care he'd shown his service weapon. He hadn't touched it in months, but his hands moved through the familiar motions of checking the magazine and chamber. Shadow's head suddenly snapped up, ears forward. A moment later, Walter heard it too, the distinctive rumble of motorcycles, growing steadily louder. "Damn it," Walter muttered, moving quickly to the window. In the street below, headlights cut through the darkness as motorcycles, at least a dozen, circled like predatory fish before parking in front of his building. Walter grabbed his phone and dialed 911. "This is Walter Granger, retired NYPD detective. I need officers at 315 West 83rd Street immediately. I have approximately 12 gang members outside my building, and I have reason to believe they're here to assault me." He gave his badge number for good measure. "Units are being dispatched, sir," the dispatcher assured him. "ETA 5 minutes. Tell them to hurry," Walter said, watching as more bikes arrived. "And tell them it's the East Side Scorpions." Shadow was now standing at full alert by the door, a low rumble building in his chest. Walter heard heavy footsteps on the stairs, too many sets to count. "Shadow, defensive position," Walter commanded quietly. Immediately, the German Shepherd moved to the spot between the door and where Walter stood, body lowered, ready for action. A heavy fist pounded on the door. "Granger, open up, old man. We just want to talk." Walter recognized the bearded biker's voice. "NYPD has been called," he announced loudly. "They'll be here any minute." "Plenty of time for what we need to do," came the response, followed by laughter from multiple voices. The door shuddered as something heavy slammed against it. Walter raised his weapon, aiming at the center of the door. "I am armed and will defend myself." Another slam, and the wood around the lock began to splinter. Shadow's growl deepened, the sound filling the apartment. When the door finally burst open, the bearded man stood in the threshold, flanked by 4 others, including the younger brother of Carlos Reyes. All held weapons, baseball bats, chains, and the bearded leader brandished a handgun. "Jesus!" the bearded man exclaimed when he saw Shadow, poised and ready to spring, teeth bared in a terrifying display. Behind him, Walter stood with his Glock trained steadily on the intruders. "You're breaking into the home of an armed retired police officer," Walter said, his voice deadly calm. "That's a felony that will put you away for years. Leave now, while you still can." The bearded biker raised his gun. You ruined my friend's family. An eye for an eye, cop. What happened next occurred so quickly that later, when giving his statement, Walter could barely sequence the events. Shadow launched forward with explosive force just as sirens wailed from the street below. The bearded man fired wildly, the shot going high as Shadow's bulk slammed into him. Walter took aim but couldn't fire with Shadow in the fray. The hallway erupted into chaos. Men shouting, Shadow's deep barks, the scramble of boots on hardwood. Through the open door, Walter saw uniformed officers rushing up the stairs, weapons drawn. Police, drop your weapons. The younger Reyes brother made a desperate lunge toward Walter, swinging a chain. Walter sidestepped with the agility of a man half his age and brought the butt of his Glock down hard on the attacker's wrist. The chain clattered to the floor as the young man howled in pain. Within moments, the hallway was filled with officers. The bearded leader was pinned beneath Shadow, the German shepherd's teeth mere inches from his throat, waiting for a command that hadn't come. Shadow, hold, Walter ordered, and the dog froze in position, maintaining perfect control despite the chaos. I'll kill you for this, Granger. The bearded man spat as officers pulled him to his feet and cuffed him. You're a dead man. As the bikers were led away, a familiar face appeared at the apartment door, Detective Melissa Torres, Walter's former partner. Christ, Walt, she said, holstering her weapon. Trouble still finds you, huh? Her eyes fell on Shadow, who had returned to Walter's side. And what's with the superdog? That doesn't look like any retired K-9 I've ever seen. Walter met her gaze, suddenly aware that there were questions he wasn't prepared to answer. We need to talk, Mel, he said quietly. But not here. The fluorescent lights of the 20th Precinct's interview room cast harsh shadows across the metal table where Walter sat, a paper cup of mediocre coffee cooling between his hands. Shadow rested at his feet, seemingly relaxed but constantly scanning the room with alert eyes. The familiar surroundings, a place where Walter had conducted countless interviews, felt suddenly alien now that he was on the other side of the table. Detective Melissa Torres entered, closing the door behind her. At 42, she carried herself with the confident efficiency that had made her one of the department's rising stars. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and the lines around her eyes had deepened in the 3 years since Walter's retirement. You're lucky Captain Daniels still has a soft spot for you, she said, dropping a file on the table. Otherwise, you'd be answering questions about that unregistered military-grade K-9 in a much less friendly setting. Walter's eyebrows rose. Shadow's registration is in order. I adopted him through the K-9 retirement program. Melissa slid a document across the table. That's what I thought too, until I made some calls. Walter glanced at the paper. A formal letter from the NYPD K-9 unit stating that no German shepherd matching Shadow's description or microchip number had ever been part of their program. Want to try again, Walt? Melissa leaned forward. Because those bikers we arrested are singing like canaries about how your pet moved like something out of a special forces training video. Walter sighed, studying his former partner. They'd worked together for 7 years. She'd been there when Marie got sick, had covered for him during the worst days of treatment. If there was anyone he could trust, it was Mel. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room, he said quietly. Melissa nodded, reaching over to switch off the recording device on the table, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Walter. Shadow isn't a retired police dog, Walter began. He's active duty, FBI Special Canine Division. FBI? Melissa repeated, her voice dropping to match his. What the hell are you involved in, Walt? Nothing, initially. Walter ran a hand through his hair. About 5 years ago, I got a call from an old academy buddy, Thomas Reeves. He'd moved to the FBI, was running a special program embedding highly trained canines with civilians who had law enforcement backgrounds. The program is called Watchdog. Why embed FBI dogs with civilians? Long-term surveillance, Walter explained. Shadow was trained to gather intelligence. The micro-expressions, the subtle body language changes that indicate someone is lying or hiding something. Shadow can read them all. He's been trained to react to specific physiological signals humans give off when engaged in criminal planning. Melissa's skepticism was evident. You're telling me your dog is an undercover FBI agent? More like a surveillance system with teeth, Walter corrected. I was supposed to be his handler for a maximum of 6 months. We were positioned near Riverside Park to monitor suspected money laundering through those high-rise condos on the west side. But that was 5 years ago, Melissa noted. Walter nodded. The operation expanded. Shadow identified connections to organized crime figures we hadn't anticipated. When the 6 months ended, Tom asked me to stay on. Said Shadow had bonded with me, wouldn't work as effectively with another handler. His expression softened. By then, I couldn't imagine giving him up anyway. So the FBI knows about tonight's incident? They should, Walter said. Shadow has an implant that activates a silent alarm if his heart rate exceeds certain parameters during a threat response. Melissa rubbed her temples. Jesus, Walt. Those weren't just random bikers tonight, were they? They're connected to your surveillance target. I think so, Walter admitted. The timing's too coincidental. Someone must have recognized me, made the connection to past cases. A sharp knock interrupted them. The door opened, revealing a tall, stern-faced man in an immaculate suit, flanked by 2 younger agents. Walter recognized him immediately. Assistant Director Keller, he acknowledged. Granger, the FBI man replied curtly before turning to Melissa. Detective Torres, will be taking over from here. This incident involves an ongoing federal investigation. Melissa stood her ground. This is my precinct, and that's my former partner you're talking about. And that, Keller said, pointing at Shadow, is federal property worth over $500,000 in training and technology. He handed Melissa an official-looking document. This comes directly from your commissioner. Stand down, detective. Melissa scanned the paper, her jaw tightening. She glanced at Walter, who gave her a subtle nod. It's okay, Mel, he assured her. I'll be fine. After she reluctantly left, Keller turned his cold gaze to Walter. You've compromised a 5-year operation, Granger. The surveillance protocol was passive observation only. Those bikers came after me, Walter protested. What was I supposed to do? The correct procedure was to activate the emergency extraction protocol, Keller replied. Instead, you engaged, revealed Shadow's capabilities, and now we have a dozen Scorpion members in custody who've seen what he can do. Walter felt a chill run down his spine. What happens now? Keller's expression was unreadable. Now, we move to containment. For your own safety, you and the asset need to be relocated immediately. Relocated where? Somewhere the Scorpions and their associates can't find you, Keller said, checking his watch. Pack whatever you can carry in one bag. You have 30 minutes. As the gravity of the situation sank in, Walter placed his hand on Shadow's head. The dog looked up at him with those intelligent amber eyes, and Walter couldn't shake the feeling that Shadow understood exactly what was happening and what wasn't being said. Walter watched pines and maples blur past the SUV's tinted windows as they traveled deeper into the forested mountains of upstate New York. Shadow sat perfectly still in the back seat beside him, seemingly unbothered by the 4 hours they'd spent on increasingly remote roads. The 2 FBI agents in the front had maintained near-complete silence since leaving the city, responding to Walter's questions with curt, unrevealing answers. We're almost there, the driver finally announced as they turned onto a narrow dirt road barely wide enough for the vehicle. Dense forest surrounded them on all sides, the midday sun filtering through the canopy in dappled patterns. And where exactly is there? Walter asked, his patience wearing thin. Safe house, replied the agent in the passenger seat. Agent Lawson, if Walter recalled correctly. Off-grid cabin. Bureau asset since the 90s. After another 10 minutes of jolting progress down the rugged road, a small clearing appeared. Nestled among towering pines stood a rustic log cabin, its weathered exterior suggesting decades of exposure to the harsh mountain elements. A small generator hummed near the side of the structure, and a satellite dish was mounted discreetly on the roof. Home sweet home, Agent Lawson said without enthusiasm. For now, at least. The cabin's interior was Spartan but functional. A main room with basic furniture, a small kitchen area, a bedroom, and a bathroom with a shower that probably ran cold more often than hot. What caught Walter's attention, however, was the surprising amount of technology scattered throughout. A sophisticated radio setup, a laptop connected to a satellite uplink, and surveillance monitors showing multiple angles of the surrounding forest. This doesn't look like a typical safe house, Walter observed. It's not, Agent Lawson confirmed, powering up the systems. It's a forward operating base for sensitive surveillance operations. You'll be comfortable enough. The driver, Agent Chun, brought in Walter's bag and a large case of supplies. Pantry's stocked. Generator has enough fuel for 3 weeks. Cell service is non-existent, but the satellite phone works for emergencies. He placed a device on the table. Call only the number programmed in memory. Nowhere else. How long are we staying here? Walter asked. The agents exchanged glances. Until extraction is authorized, Lawson replied vaguely. Director Keller will contact you through secure channels with updates. And who's staying with us? Walter asked, noticing they'd brought only his bag inside. No one, Chin said simply. You and the asset are safer without additional personnel that could be tracked. Walter's eyes widened. You're leaving us alone out here? What if the Scorpions somehow track us down? Lawson nodded toward Shadow. You have the Bureau's most advanced 4-legged security system. Plus this. He placed a locked case on the table and opened it to reveal a Sig Sauer P226 and 3 magazines. Your service weapon preference, according to your file. 20 minutes later, Walter stood on the cabin's small porch watching the SUV disappear down the dirt road, leaving him and Shadow truly alone. The silence of the forest was absolute after the vehicle's engine faded. No traffic noise, no sirens, no human voices. Just wind through pine needles and occasional birdsong. Well, boy, Walter said to Shadow, who sat attentively at his side. Looks like it's just us for a while. Shadow's ears perked up suddenly, his gaze fixing on the tree line to their right. Walter instinctively reached for the Sig now holstered at his hip, but Shadow's body language wasn't indicating threat, just interest. A moment later, a deer emerged cautiously from the woods, froze upon seeing them, then bounded away. Walter exhaled slowly. I'm going to be jumping at shadows out here, aren't I? He gave a humorless laugh at his unintentional pun. No offense. Shadow padded back into the cabin, and Walter followed, securing the door behind them. He spent the next hour familiarizing himself with the cabin's layout and security systems. The surveillance setup was more extensive than he'd initially realized, with motion sensors placed throughout the surrounding forest and thermal imaging capabilities for night monitoring. As evening approached, Walter prepared a simple meal from the stocked supplies. He'd just sat down to eat when Shadow suddenly stood, alert and focused on the bedroom door. What is it, boy? Walter asked, reaching again for his weapon. Shadow walked purposefully to the bedroom, then looked back at Walter, clearly wanting him to follow. In the bedroom, Shadow went directly to a section of wall near the closet and sat, staring intently at what appeared to be solid pine paneling. Walter ran his hands over the wall, feeling for inconsistencies. His fingers found a nearly invisible seam, and with careful pressure, a small section of paneling slid aside to reveal a hidden compartment. Inside was a waterproof case. Good boy, Walter murmured, carefully removing the case. Inside, he found a collection of files marked classified, several encrypted USB drives, and photographs of individuals Walter didn't recognize, except one. The bearded biker leader from Riverside Park was clearly visible in surveillance photos, meeting with men in expensive suits. But what truly sent a chill down Walter's spine was a folder labeled Watchdog Program, containing detailed specifications of Shadow's training, capabilities, and implanted technology, including a complex schematic of what appeared to be the tracking and monitoring devices embedded under the dog's skin. They didn't bring us here to protect us, Walter whispered, looking at Shadow with new understanding. They're hiding us because you know too much. Shadow tilted his head, those intelligent amber eyes fixed on Walter's face, as if confirming his suspicions. Outside, darkness fell over Pine Ridge Forest, and Walter couldn't shake the feeling that they were far from safe, even in this isolated hideaway. Rain pelted the cabin's roof as Walter spread the classified documents across the rough wooden table. 3 days of isolation had given him ample time to sort through the hidden files, piecing together a disturbing picture of corruption and conspiracy. Shadow lay nearby, occasionally lifting his head when Walter muttered in disbelief at new revelations. This goes higher than I ever imagined, boy, Walter said, tapping a document detailing money transfers between shell companies. The Scorpions are just foot soldiers. The files painted a clear picture. What had begun as an investigation into money laundering had uncovered a sprawling network of corruption extending deep into New York law enforcement. The operation, codenamed Cerberus, had documented illicit activity involving several high-ranking NYPD officers, including names that made Walter's blood run cold. Captain James Doyle, Walter read aloud, staring at the surveillance photos of his former commander meeting with known drug traffickers, and Lieutenant Maria Mendez. Shadow's ears perked up at Mendez's name. The German shepherd rose and moved to Walter's side, pressing against his leg. "You remember her, don't you?" Walter said, running his hand through Shadow's thick fur. "She came to the hospital when Marie was sick. Brought those flowers." The memory of Mendez's seemingly genuine kindness now felt like a cruel deception. Another file contained transaction records showing millions flowing through offshore accounts linked to both officers. According to the notes, these funds represented a small percentage of profits from a massive drug operation that used NYPD resources and intelligence to eliminate competition and protect shipments. "No wonder the FBI kept this operation going for 5 years, Walter muttered. This would gut the department's upper ranks. He picked up a particularly disturbing photograph. Captain Doyle accepting an envelope from a man identified in the margin as Viktor Petrov, a Russian national with ties to organized crime. The satellite phone suddenly chirped, making Walter jump. He grabbed it, noting the display showed the secure number he'd been given. "Granger," he answered. "We have a situation." It was Keller's voice, tense and hurried. "The safe house location may be compromised. We're sending an extraction team." Walter's grip tightened on the phone. "How did that happen?" "Internal leak," Keller replied curtly. "Be ready to move at 0600 tomorrow. Destroy any documentation you've found." "That's an order." The line went dead before Walter could respond. He looked at Shadow, whose posture had stiffened during the call. "He's lying," Walter said with certainty. "They don't want us sharing what we've found." Walter spent the next hour photographing key documents with the basic digital camera he'd found in the cabin's supplies. He then loaded the memory card into a small waterproof case and concealed it in the inner lining of his boot, a hiding technique he'd learned decades ago from an old narcotics detective. That night, sleep eluded him as he sat by the window, Sig Sauer close at hand, watching the rain-drenched forest for any sign of movement. Shadow remained vigilant beside him, both of them knowing the coming dawn might bring either rescue or something far more sinister. The extraction team arrived precisely at 0600, 2 black SUVs rolling into the clearing with headlights cutting through the early morning mist. Walter watched through binoculars as men in tactical gear emerged, moving with the disciplined precision of federal agents. But something felt wrong. "Those aren't FBI formations," Walter whispered to Shadow. Years of joint operations had taught him to recognize the movement patterns of different agencies. His suspicion turned to certainty when he spotted a familiar face among the approaching men. Officer Ramirez from Riverside Park, the same patrolman who'd exchanged pleasantries with Walter just days before the biker attack. "They've sent corrupt cops to clean up loose ends," Walter said grimly. "Time for Plan B." He quickly gathered his essentials: weapon, ammunition, the satellite phone, water, and emergency supplies, into a small backpack. The hidden camera memory card remained secure in his boot. Walter led Shadow to the cabin's rear exit, a reinforced door he'd discovered behind shelving in the pantry, designed as an emergency escape route. It opened to a narrow trail leading deeper into the forest, away from the approaching team. "Quiet now, boy," Walter whispered, easing the door closed behind them. They moved swiftly through the dense undergrowth, Walter's decades of urban tactical experience translating surprisingly well to wilderness evasion. Shadow moved like a shadow himself, utterly silent despite his size, staying close to Walter's side. The sound of the cabin door being breached echoed through the trees, followed by shouted commands. Walter picked up the pace, heading toward the coordinates of a forest ranger station he'd memorized from maps in the cabin, 18 miles northeast, their best hope for legitimate authorities. For hours into their journey, with the cabin far behind them, Walter paused at a small stream to refill their water. Shadow suddenly went rigid, eyes fixed on something across the water. Walter followed his gaze and saw it, a motion-activated trail camera mounted on a tree, its lens pointed directly at them. They'll have eyes all through these woods, Walter realized. Official channels monitoring wildlife. An idea formed in his mind, desperate but possibly their only chance. Walter removed the satellite phone and powered it on, quickly finding the emergency signal function he'd noted in the manual. "Let's send a message that can't be hidden," he told Shadow, pressing the emergency beacon button while standing directly in front of the trail camera. The phone confirmed the distress signal had been sent to all programmed emergency contacts, including, Walter knew from the phone's contact list, the FBI field office in Albany and the state police. "Now we run," Walter said, pocketing the phone. "Because in about 30 seconds, every corrupt cop in these woods is going to know exactly where we are." They sprinted away from the stream, changing direction frequently to confuse pursuers. Walter knew they couldn't outrun radios. Their only hope was to evade long enough for legitimate authorities to respond to the emergency signal. An hour later, the distant sound of helicopter rotors echoed through the forest canopy. Walter found a small clearing and removed his jacket, using it to signal to the aircraft now visible through gaps in the trees. "Let's hope it's the good guys," he told Shadow, who stood beside him, alert for ground pursuit. The helicopter, marked with state police insignia, circled once before hovering to lower a tactical officer on a line. As the officer approached with weapon ready, Walter raised his hands. "Walter Granger, retired NYPD detective," he called out. "I have evidence of police corruption reaching the highest levels of the department. Multiple corrupt officers are in these woods trying to silence me." The officer approached cautiously, eyeing Shadow. "Any way to verify your identity?" Walter slowly reached into his pocket and produced his retired detective shield. "Call this in, and contact FBI Assistant Director Thomas Reeves directly. Tell him Watchdog needs extraction." The officer's radio crackled. "Be advised, we have armed individuals approaching your position from the west. State police jurisdiction confirmed. FBI en route." Walter looked down at Shadow, whose steady gaze reflected his own determination. "Looks like we're finally going to blow this thing wide open, boy." The 20th precinct hummed with unusual tension as Walter was escorted through the familiar corridors by FBI agents. 3 days had passed since their dramatic helicopter rescue from Pine Ridge Forest. After debriefing at the Albany field office and a medical evaluation for both him and Shadow, Walter had insisted on returning to face this moment in person. Shadow walked obediently at his side, drawing curious and sometimes wary glances from officers they passed. The German shepherd's demeanor was calm but vigilant, his training evident in how his eyes constantly scanned for threats even in these supposedly secure surroundings. "You sure you want to do this?" Agent Reeves asked quietly. Tom Reeves looked older than Walter remembered from their academy days, the stress of his position etched into the lines of his face. "The U.S. Attorney's Office could handle the arrests without you present." "I need to see their faces," Walter replied firmly. 5 years of my life went into building this case, Tom. I deserve to be there when it all comes down." They approached the conference room where, according to plan, Captain James Doyle and Lieutenant Maria Mendez had been summoned for an emergency budget meeting. Neither knew that federal indictments with their names had been issued hours earlier. Outside the room, Walter spotted Melissa Torres leaning against the wall, her expression grim. When she saw him, something like relief flickered across her features. "You look like hell, Walt," she said, pushing off the wall to meet him. "Wilderness survival wasn't covered extensively at the academy," he replied with a thin smile. Melissa glanced at the FBI agents, then lowered her voice. "Is it true? About Doyle and Mendez?" Walter nodded solemnly. "And at least 6 others in command positions. The evidence is rock solid, Mel. Financial records, surveillance, recorded conversations. Shadow has been collecting it all for years." She shook her head in disbelief. "Jesus, I've been reporting directly to dirty cops my entire career." Agent Reeves checked his watch. "They're both inside. We should move now, before they get suspicious." Walter took a deep breath, centering himself. "Shadow, stay close," he murmured. The dog pressed gently against his leg in acknowledgement. When they entered the conference room, the surprised expressions on Doyle and Mendez's faces quickly transformed. Doyle's to calculated neutrality, Mendez's to poorly concealed alarm. "Walter," Captain Doyle said, rising from his chair. At 58, Doyle still maintained the powerful build of his younger days. his silver hair and commanding presence having earned him the nickname, the Silver Eagle, among junior officers. Heard you had some trouble upstate. Glad to see you're all right. Captain, Walter acknowledged coldly. Lieutenant Mendez remained seated, her dark eyes fixed on Shadow. What's going on here, James? She asked, addressing Doyle but watching the German shepherd warily. Before Doyle could answer, FBI agents entered the room from a side door. Agent Reeves stepped forward. Captain James Doyle, Lieutenant Maria Mendez, I'm Assistant Director Thomas Reeves with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You are both under arrest for corruption, racketeering, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, and obstruction of justice. The color drained from Mendez's face, but Doyle's expression hardened into something dangerous. This is absurd, he stated flatly. Whatever you think you have, we have everything, James, Walter interrupted. 5 years of surveillance. Every meeting with Petrov, every offshore transaction, every piece of intelligence you fed to the Scorpions about rival operations. Shadow here recorded it all. Doyle's eyes narrowed, focusing on the German shepherd. A dog? You expect me to believe. Not just any dog, Agent Reeves interjected. A specially trained FBI asset equipped with cutting-edge surveillance technology. Every word you've spoken in his presence has been recorded and analyzed. Understanding dawned in Doyle's eyes. The retirement party. You brought him to my retirement party 3 years ago. Walter nodded. And a dozen other social gatherings where you let your guard down. Not to mention the meetings in Riverside Park that you thought nobody was watching. Mendez suddenly pushed back from the table. This is a setup. You have nothing admissible. Save it for your attorney, Lieutenant, Reeves said coldly. The U.S. attorney has already convened a grand jury. Doyle's hand moved subtly toward his jacket, a movement so slight most might have missed it. But Walter didn't miss it, and neither did Shadow. The German shepherd's posture shifted instantly, a low warning growl emanating from deep in his chest. I wouldn't, James, Walter advised quietly. He's faster than you think. For a tense moment, the room balanced on a knife's edge. Then Doyle's shoulders sagged slightly. I want to make a deal, he said, addressing Reeves while pointedly ignoring Walter. That's not my department, Reeves replied. But I should warn you. We already have 3 of your associates cooperating against you. Mendez shot Doyle a panicked look. James, don't say another word. But Doyle had already calculated his odds and made his decision. The evidence files, they implicate others much higher up than me. People who can make problems disappear, even for the FBI. Walter and Reeves exchanged glances. This confirmed their suspicions about the conspiracy extending beyond the NYPD. We'll discuss that downtown, Reeves said carefully. As the agents moved to handcuff Doyle, he made his move. With surprising speed for a man his age, he lunged toward a side table where a letter opener lay, grabbing it, and turning toward Walter in one fluid motion. Call off your mutt or I'll, he began, but never finished. Shadow launched across the room, a black missile of precision and power. He didn't aim for Doyle's throat or limbs as an attack dog might. Instead, he slammed into the captain's midsection with controlled force, knocking him backward onto the floor. In an instant, Shadow was poised above him, teeth bared but not biting, maintaining perfect control as he'd been trained. Shadow, hold, Walter commanded firmly. Agents swarmed forward, securing Doyle as Shadow maintained his position until Walter called him back. As Doyle and Mendez were led away in handcuffs, the captain turned back to Walter, his expression a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. You've made powerful enemies today, Granger. This isn't over. Walter met his gaze steadily. For you it is. After they'd gone, Melissa approached Walter, shaking her head in amazement. That was something else. What happens now? Now, Walter sighed, kneeling to ruffle Shadow's fur. We finish what we started. There are still pieces of this puzzle missing, like who tipped off the Scorpions about me in the first place. Agent Reeves joined them. The Bureau would like to debrief you both thoroughly. There's a secure facility. Walter held up his hand. First, Shadow needs a proper veterinary check. After everything he's been through, his health comes first. Reeves nodded in agreement. Of course, we'll arrange it immediately. As they left the precinct, Walter couldn't shake the feeling that Doyle's warning wasn't empty bravado. They'd struck a significant blow against corruption today, but something told him the real power behind this conspiracy remained in the shadows, watching and waiting. The veterinary clinic attached to the FBI's New York field office was state-of-the-art, more reminiscent of a human medical facility than a place for animal care. Walter sat in a sterile waiting room, scrolling through news reports of the arrests that had rocked the NYPD. 8 high-ranking officers taken into custody simultaneously, with hints of more arrests to come. The media was calling it the biggest police corruption scandal in decades. Dr. Elaine Chun, the Bureau's lead veterinary specialist, emerged through sliding doors wearing blue scrubs. Her expression was professionally neutral, but Walter immediately sensed something was wrong. "How is he?" Walter asked, rising to his feet. "Physically, Shadow is in excellent condition," Dr. Chun replied. "No injuries from your time in the forest, and his baseline health metrics are optimal." "But," Walter prompted, catching the hesitation in her voice. Dr. Chun glanced over her shoulder before lowering her voice. "We found something during the scanning process that wasn't in his official specs. I think you should see this." She led Walter through to an examination room where Shadow lay calmly on a table, apparently unfazed by the medical attention. Large monitors displayed various scans of the German Shepherd's internal structure, highlighting the sophisticated technology embedded within him. "These are the standard Watchdog program implants," Dr. Chin explained, pointing to several small devices visible in the imaging. "Tracking beacon, vital sign monitors, audio recording system, and the neural interface that allows him to flag suspicious behavior patterns." Walter nodded. He'd seen the schematics in the files at the cabin. "And this," Dr. Chin continued, zooming in on a tiny object nestled near Shadow's spine, "is definitely not standard issue." Walter leaned closer to examine the screen. "What am I looking at?" "A secondary surveillance device," she replied. "Extremely sophisticated. It's been designed to mimic tissue to avoid detection by routine scans. We only found it because we were doing a comprehensive evaluation with our newest equipment." Walter felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you saying Shadow has been bugged by someone other than the FBI?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Dr. Chin confirmed. "And based on the technology, this wasn't installed by amateurs. This is cutting-edge, possibly military-grade. Can you tell how long it's been there?" "The integration with surrounding tissue suggests at least 3 years," she said. "Possibly longer." Walter's mind raced through the implications. "Does it have transmission capabilities?" "Yes, though its exact specifications are beyond even my understanding. I've called in specialists from Quantico." She hesitated before adding, "Mr. Granger, whoever placed this had access to Shadow during an official procedure. This isn't something that could be implanted without sophisticated surgical facilities." The door opened, and Agent Reeves entered, his face grim. "I just got briefed on the finding," he said, dispensing with pleasantries. "This changes everything." "Someone's been monitoring your operation," Walter said. "For years." Reeves nodded. "The question is, who? And how deep does this go? Can you remove it?" Walter asked Dr. Chun, gently stroking Shadow's head. "Yes, but I wouldn't recommend it yet," she replied. "If we remove it, whoever's monitoring will know we've found it. Right now, we have an advantage." "She's right," Reeves agreed. "We need to trace the transmission signal, find out where it leads." Walter looked down at Shadow, who gazed back with those intelligent eyes that seemed to understand everything happening around him. "All this time, you've been reporting to 2 masters without even knowing it." Shadow tilted his head slightly, as if acknowledging the strange situation. "I want protection for my family," Walter said, turning to Reeves. "If someone's been watching Shadow, they've been watching me too, including my visits to my daughter and granddaughter." "Already done," Reeves assured him. "They've been moved to a safe location under 24-hour protection." Catherine wasn't happy about missing work, but she understood the gravity when we explained. Walter exhaled in relief. "What's our next move?" "We're setting up a secure operations center to trace the signal from Shadow's unauthorized implant," Reeves explained. "In the meantime, you'll both be relocated to a Bureau-safe house. A real one this time, with agents I personally vetted." "I want to be involved in the investigation," Walter insisted. "I've earned that much." Reeves studied his old friend for a moment before nodding. "Agreed. But you follow protocols to the letter. This goes beyond corrupt cops, Walter. The technology in that implant suggests government resources. You think this might be internal?" Walter asked, lowering his voice. "Someone inside the Bureau." "I'm not ruling anything out," Reeves replied grimly. The Watchdog program was classified top secret. Only a handful of people had access to the complete details, including Shadow's maintenance schedule. Dr. Chin carefully removed the monitoring equipment from Shadow, who sat up attentively once released. I'll prepare a detailed report on the device, but I'd advise maintaining normal routines as much as possible. Don't give any indication that we've discovered it. As they prepared to leave, Walter's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. His blood ran cold as he read the screen. The dog was never just watching others, Walter. He was watching you too. Some secrets should stay buried in Pine Ridge. Last warning. Walter showed the message to Reeves, whose expression darkened. They know we found it. But how? Walter demanded. We just discovered it ourselves. Dr. Chin paled. The scanning equipment. If their technology is as advanced as I suspect, they might have detection capabilities we haven't anticipated. Reeves immediately activated his radio. Security breach protocol. All units respond. Lock down the facility. No one enters or leaves without my authorization. As alarms began blaring throughout the building, Shadow pressed close to Walter's side, his posture alert but calm, ready for whatever came next. We've stumbled into something much bigger than police corruption, Walter murmured, placing his hand reassuringly on Shadow's back. Someone very powerful doesn't want us digging any deeper. Then we must be getting close to the truth, Reeves said, drawing his weapon as security personnel swarmed into the corridor outside. For the first time since this ordeal began, Walter felt truly afraid, not for himself, but for what the spreading ripples of this conspiracy might mean for everyone involved. Autumn sunlight streamed through the windows of Walter's new apartment in Arlington, Virginia, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. 3 months had passed since the discovery of the unauthorized implant in Shadow, 3 months of debriefings, testimony, and gradual adjustments to a new reality. The German shepherd dozed peacefully on a memory foam bed by the sofa, his surgical scar barely visible beneath his thick fur. Walter sipped his coffee, watching pedestrians on the quiet street below. Witness protection had its advantages: a comfortable place to live, financial security, and round-the-clock protection discreetly positioned around the building. But it also meant severing ties with his old life, with only occasional secure visits from Catherine and Emma to break the isolation. The doorbell rang, and Shadow was instantly alert, moving to Walter's side as he approached the entrance. Walter checked the security panel, relaxing when he saw Tom Reeves on the monitor. "Morning, Walt," Reeves said when the door opened, holding up a bag from a local bakery. "Brought those sourdough rolls you like." "You didn't come all this way for a bread delivery," Walter observed, letting him in. Shadow greeted Reeves with a gentle nudge of his nose, their relationship having evolved over months of close cooperation. "No, I didn't," Reeves admitted, setting the bag on the kitchen counter. He removed his jacket, revealing his sidearm, a reminder that even in the comfort of Walter's apartment, threats remained. The grand jury returned indictments this morning. 27 in total, including Doyle, Mendez, and 3 federal officers who were on Petrov's payroll. Walter nodded, absorbing the news. "What about the implant? Any progress tracing the technology?" Reeves's expression tightened. "That's why I'm here. The analysis came back yesterday." He removed a folder from his briefcase and spread several documents on the dining table. "The tech contains components manufactured exclusively for DARPA Black projects. Specifically, a program called Oversight that was supposedly discontinued in 2017. Military intelligence," Walter said, the pieces clicking into place. "They were monitoring your operation." "Not just monitoring," Reeves corrected. "Based on the transmission logs we recovered, they were actively interfering, selectively blocking certain evidence Shadow collected, particularly anything connecting to military or intelligence personnel." Walter leaned heavily against the table. "So when Shadow identified connections beyond local law enforcement, those findings never made it to our analysts," Reeves confirmed. "The secondary implant filtered what we received." "Who authorized it?" Reeves's expression was grim. "That's where things get complicated. The program officially reports to Joint Special Operations Command, but the authorization for Shadow's implant came from much higher. We're talking National Security Council level." Walter let out a low whistle. "So what's the play now? These aren't people you can just slap handcuffs on." "No, they're not," Reeves agreed. "But they didn't count on you finding those files in the Pine Ridge cabin." The evidence you preserved proves the deliberate obstruction of a federal investigation. The director has taken it directly to the Attorney General. A question had been nagging at Walter for months. The cabin. How did those files end up there? It couldn't have been coincidence. It wasn't, Reeves confirmed. We've identified a whistleblower within DARPA, someone who wanted that evidence found. They're in protective custody now. Shadow suddenly lifted his head, ears perked toward the window. Walter moved carefully to the side of the glass, peering out at the street below. A black sedan had parked across from the building, 2 men in suits watching the entrance. "We've got company," Walter said quietly. Reeves joined him at the window, staying out of sight. "They're not mine," he confirmed after studying the vehicle. "Bureau agents would have checked in." "How did they find us?" Walter asked, though he already suspected the answer. "The implant was removed, but they had 3 years of tracking data," Reeves said. "They likely established your behavioral patterns, identified people you might contact." Walter's thoughts immediately went to his family. "Catherine and Emma are still secure," Reeves assured him. "I spoke to their protection detail an hour ago." Walter watched as one of the men exited the vehicle, speaking into what appeared to be a communications device. "What's our move?" "We stick to the plan," Reeves said firmly. "Tomorrow, you and Shadow testify before a closed Senate Intelligence Committee hearing. Everything you've seen, everything you know about the interference with the investigation. Once that testimony is on record, it becomes much harder for anyone to make you disappear." Walter turned to look at Shadow, who remained alert but calm. "They'll try to discredit us. Say the evidence is fabricated, that Shadow's data is unreliable. That's why we're bringing him," Reeves explained. "The committee has authorized a live demonstration of Shadow's capabilities under controlled conditions. They want to see firsthand what he can do." Walter raised an eyebrow. "You're going to have a classified military asset perform tricks for senators?" "Not tricks," Reeves corrected with a slight smile. "Truth verification. We've arranged for several witnesses to appear, including individuals connected to the conspiracy. Shadow will demonstrate his ability to detect deception through physiological indicators." Walter nodded slowly, understanding the strategy. Shadow's unique abilities, the very reason he'd been created, would now help expose those who had tried to misuse him. The man on the street returned to the sedan, which pulled away moments later. "Just reconnaissance for now," Reeves observed. "But we should move you to the secure facility tonight instead of waiting for morning." As they gathered essentials for an immediate relocation, Walter knelt beside Shadow, who watched him with those intelligent eyes that had seen so much. "Almost done, boy," he said softly, scratching behind the German shepherd's ears. "Just one more mission." Shadow pressed his muzzle against Walter's hand, a gesture of affection and trust that spoke volumes. Whatever came next, they would face it together, a retired detective and his extraordinary dog, bound by circumstances neither could have imagined, but partners in every sense of the word. As they prepared to leave, Walter glanced once more around the apartment that had briefly been home. The investigation had exposed corruption at the highest levels, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they'd only scratched the surface of something much larger. "You realize," he said to Reeves as they headed for the door, Shadow at his side, "that even after tomorrow, this won't really be over." Reeves nodded, his expression solemn. "Some battles you fight to win. Others, you fight just to bring the truth to light. Either way, the fight matters." Walter placed his hand on Shadow's head, drawing strength from the dog's unwavering presence. "Then let's make sure the truth has its day." As they stepped into the hallway, Walter squared his shoulders, ready for whatever came next. The path ahead remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. The bond forged through danger and discovery between a man and his remarkable companion would continue to be their greatest asset in the ongoing pursuit of justice. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and if you've watched this far, comment "I watched this far" and leave your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the end screen. It's very exciting.